During the lunch break on the first day of pre-season testing at the Bahrain circuit, the Ferrari technicians and engineers conducted an initial analysis with a clear perspective. In Formula One, the ability to compare data is always crucial, especially after gathering so much important and useful information. The Italian team carried out a rather extensive morning session with Lewis Hamilton. According to what has been reported by various Italian news media outlets, the goal with the Briton was to carry out a specific task testing more aggressive setups, as Charles Leclerc had done last week during the shakedown at the Fiorano circuit. It was important to receive feedback on this aspect from the seven-time world champion as well. In the afternoon session, Ferrari's in-house expert took to the track. We refer to the Monegasque driver, who is about to enter his seventh Formula One season with the Maranello team. It was up to him to assess the qualities of the Ferrari without the limitations that the team had to endure during the Fiorano shakedown, as it was only a filming day. The comparisons with the former Mercedes driver are important because they help precisely determine the setup range and tire performance, while also working to define the SF-25 car's aerodynamic map. Charles Leclerc also mounted a large aerodynamic rake. In his case, however, the structure was placed at the rear of the car, right next to the tires. This is a setup with various pitot tubes that measure static and dynamic pressure. The idea was to scan the entire vertical area and map the pressure field, then compare the collected data with computational fluid dynamics results. This test confirms the changes to the floor that we had anticipated during the car's presentation. The visible portion of the floor is similar to the experimental Las Vegas specification, but the real changes are in the hidden area, where the Venturi channels are located. The same applies to the keel area. To make the device work optimally, the run was conducted at specific speeds and in certain parts of the track to ensure that the mapping was not distorted by other disruptive variables. Once this test was completed, the car was brought into the garage to remove the aero rakes. In Charles Leclerc's hands, the Ferrari immediately seemed more responsive. Let's take a step back to understand why. In the final part of the first session, drivability improved with Lewis Hamilton. Thanks to the information gathered at Fiorano, as mentioned, we know that Charles Leclerc had tested the SF-25 with more extreme setups. Conversely, Lewis Hamilton's setup was much more neutral. That's why the Briton also carried out this type of work this morning, to provide further insights for the team. There is a match between the car's behavior at Fiorano with Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton's run this morning. In both cases, in certain corners, understeer turned into excessive rotation. Let's go back to Charles Leclerc's third run, after a quick stint to check all the car's functionalities. The Ferrari driver hits the track on C3 tires. Observing the footage, it is immediately clear that the SF-25 is a distant relative of the car driven by Lewis Hamilton. Initially, in the third sector, the driving was not yet perfect, with the SF-25 forced to partially lift off the throttle. The same happened in the middle of the snake section, where Charles Leclerc lifted at turn 6. His confidence with the car then progressively increased, also thanks to a setup adjustment. Let's analyze the Monegasque's fast lap, starting from the assumption that traction has improved based on the driver's feedback. Slightly wide at turn 1, car number 16 has a good exit phase. At turn 4, performance is good but not perfect. On entry, he slightly misses the apex due to mild understeer. Meanwhile, in the snake section, the car appears well planted. At turn 8, a medium-low speed corner, the front responds excellently without any corrections. Even at turn 10, there are no issues, although other cars seem more stable in that section. Exit traction remains strong, with the turn seemingly taken flat out based on the engine sound. At turn 11, slight understeer on entry forces Charles Leclerc to open the steering when approaching the apex. On exit, he has to correct as he applies throttle with more steering angle than necessary. At turn 13, directionality is good, although he uses less curb than the McLaren. In the final corner, understeer is still present, with a slight snap on exit turning into oversteer. As expected, using an effective setup and setting aside experiments has transformed the car's behavior. After the second part of the session, an electrical issue arises, leaving the track in darkness. A red flag halts all Formula One activity. About an hour later, the session resumes, though shortly after, a light rain hits the track. The situation does not prevent the drivers from running. Ferrari decides to conduct a more substantial high-fuel test to assess tire management. Ferrari introduced several updates on its new car, making it clear that the first day was about exploration, understanding the car in different conditions. In this scenario, the Ferrari's drivability is not optimal. Several corrections are noticeable, and performance is rather inconsistent. The balance still needs improvement in this aspect. The direction is right, but there is still work to do for the Italian team. Charles Leclerc requests and receives a rear-end adjustment to soften the rear, a winning move as the Ferrari responds well, gaining greater stability in both pace and lap times. About 20 minutes later, a front-end tweak follows, adjusting the front suspension. This is not a matter of kinematics, as it is impossible to modify it in this way. Through the panel on the nose cone, adjustments are made to ride height or stiffness. From what we understand, it was the latter. The final stint ends with alternating laps, where the Ferrari driver tests the changes. However, time runs out and everyone heads to dinner. Our analysis will continue tomorrow, hoping Ferrari can take another step forward. At the conclusion of Day 1 in Bahrain, Lando Norris topped the timesheets. The McLaren driver set the fastest lap at 1.30.430 on medium tires, namely C3, the soft compound for the Bahrain GP weekend. The Woking team's driver edged out George Russell's Mercedes by just over a tenth, and Max Verstappen's Red Bull by about 0.2. However, discussing lap times in testing is always premature. Pre-season tests are not like free practice sessions during a race weekend, and team programs are even more varied. Still, the front of the grid appears to be quite compact, with the top teams not showing significant gaps from one another. Day 1 in Bahrain welcomed the teams with unusually cool weather for the region. The temperature remained around 15 degrees Celsius throughout the day, creating conditions very different from those expected at the Grand Prix in April. The fastest lap times were recorded in the afternoon, as the track became more rubbered in and conditions improved. A power outage at the circuit also disrupted team programs, forcing race control to extend the session by an hour. The reigning Constructors' Champions from 2024, McLaren enters the 2025 Formula One campaign as the team to beat. For the first day of testing in Bahrain, the British squad fielded Oscar Piastri in the morning session and Lando Norris in the afternoon. The most notable insights from the papaya-colored camp came from Lando Norris, who set the fastest lap of the day. The Briton topped the day 1 timesheets at the Sakhir circuit, capping off a well-balanced session. As expected, McLaren followed a straightforward program, continuing seamlessly from its 2024 progress. Tomorrow, Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc will take to the track in the same order. The risk of rain, which is currently at 30%, could affect the morning session. In the afternoon, the Monegasque driver will begin performance work, a phase that his new Maranello teammate will complete on Friday when Charles Leclerc takes to the track in the first session of the day.